A multimillionaire's Rolls-Royce sat silent in his garage, a $500,000 paperweight his expert mechanics couldn't fix. But when a homeless man named William offered to repair it for a simple meal, they all laughed, ready to throw him out. But they were mocking the ghost of Rolls-Royce, the legendary chief engineer the company had framed with fake charges and ruined, just to keep his brilliant mind off the market. Against all odds, the millionaire looked at the homeless man and decided to take a gamble. He gave him one chance. Want to know what happened next? Watch this video until the end. Before we begin this powerful story of a forgotten genius, we'd love to know where you're watching from in the world today. Let us know in the comments. Your support helps us create more stories like this, so please make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the incredible conclusion. In the heart of a rain-lashed city, multi-millionaire Arthur Sterling's private garage was a cathedral of automotive perfection. The floor, made of polished, white concrete, was clean enough to eat off. Custom LED panels bathed the collection of supercars in a soft, reverent glow. But tonight, this temple of horsepower was the site of a frustrating, expensive failure. In the center lift sat the king of the collection, a vintage Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud, a $500,000 masterpiece of British engineering, and it was completely dead. A team of 4 expert mechanics in pristine, embroidered uniforms surrounded the silent giant, their faces a mixture of sweat and defeat. Laptops with complex diagnostic software lay open, their screens showing nothing but green check marks. "I don't get it, Mr. Sterling," the head mechanic Marco said, wiping his brow. "The engine is perfect, the ignition is firing, the fuel system is flawless, but it just won't start. It's like the car's soul has just vanished." Sterling, a man whose tailored suit cost more than a family car, scowled. "I don't pay you 6 figures a year to tell me a car has a ghost, Marco. I pay you to fix it." The argument was so intense that no one noticed the figure huddled in the massive open doorway of the garage. A homeless man in his late 30s, William, had sought refuge from the torrential downpour. His jacket was thin and soaked, his face gaunt from hunger, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent, and currently fixed on the silent Rolls-Royce. He could hear it from across the room, a faint, high-pitched electrical whine that the mechanics, with all their loud equipment and frustrated shouting, had completely missed. It was a sound he knew intimately, a sound that haunted his dreams. He took a hesitant step forward, his worn boots squeaking on the polished floor. "It's not the engine," he said, his voice quiet but clear, cutting through the tense air. "It's the wiring loom. You have a parasitic drain in the canopus electrical system." The 4 mechanics turned to stare at him, their frustration instantly finding a new target. Their expressions shifted from confusion to pure, unadulterated contempt. Marco was the first to speak, a cruel, mocking laugh escaping his lips. "And who the hell are you? The ghost you were talking about?" The other mechanic snickered. "Look at the state of him. He probably thinks a canopus system is a type of coffee." Sterling's face hardened. "Security! Get this trash out of my garage now." William stood his ground, his gaze never leaving the Rolls-Royce. "I can fix it," he said, his voice gaining a sliver of confidence. He then turned to the mechanics. "All I'm asking for is a hot meal." The garage erupted in laughter. It was a harsh, echoing sound, bouncing off the expensive cars and pristine walls. "You," Marco sneered, stepping right up to William. "You think you can fix a $500,000 car that we can't? Your hands are filthy. You'll ruin the leather. Get out before I throw you out myself." Mr. Sterling was about to shout for security again, but he paused. Something about the homeless man's certainty, the use of that specific technical term, gave him a moment's hesitation. He was a gambler, a man who had built his empire on risky bets and gut feelings. His expert team had failed. What did he have to lose? "Wait," Sterling commanded, his voice silencing the mechanics. He looked William up and down, a cold, calculating glint in his eye. "You say you can fix my car. My experts say it's impossible. So let's make a wager." He strode over to a large digital clock on the wall. "You can touch my car, but the moment you do, I start this timer. You have exactly 1 minute, 60 seconds. If you fix it, you can eat from my personal kitchen for a month. But if you fail," he said, his voice dropping to a low threat, I will personally make sure you are arrested for trespassing and attempted grand theft auto. Do we have a deal? A wave of shock passed through the mechanics. This was better than just throwing him out. This was a public execution. They smirked, pulling out their phones to record the inevitable failure. William looked from the cold eyes of the millionaire to the mocking faces of the mechanics. He simply nodded. Deal. He walked slowly towards the silent, gleaming Rolls-Royce, the four mechanics parting before him like a wave. The air was thick with tension and the smell of ozone from the rain. Marco stood by the wall clock, his finger hovering over the start button. Sterling watched, his arms crossed, a man about to win a bet he couldn't possibly lose. William reached the car, his reflection a ghostly, ragged figure in the perfect silver paint. He took a deep breath and reached out his hand, his dirty, calloused fingers moving towards the priceless, iconic hood ornament, the spirit of ecstasy. They gave him just 60 seconds to perform a miracle and prove his worth. If you believe a person should be judged by their skills and not by their appearance, comment "skills over suits" below. As William's calloused fingers made contact with the silver hood ornament, the head mechanic, Marco, mockingly shouted, "Timer starts now," and hit the button on the large wall clock. The red digits began their ruthless countdown from 60 seconds. The mechanics snickered, phones held up, ready to capture the moment the homeless man failed. But William didn't move frantically. He didn't even look at the engine. He moved with a serene, almost ghostly calm. He walked to the passenger side door, opened it, and leaned in, his ragged form a shocking intrusion into the pristine cream leather interior. For a few seconds, he did nothing but listen. His head tilted as if hearing a whisper no one else could. The clock ticked past 10 seconds. "What's he doing? Looking for spare change?" Marco sneered. Then, with a sudden, precise movement, William reached under the dashboard, his hand disappearing into a mess of wires the mechanics had checked a dozen times. There was a faint, audible click. Instantly, the dashboard lights flickered to life. The mechanic's smirks faltered. William calmly walked to the front of the car, leaned in through the open driver's door, and turned the key. The Rolls-Royce V12 engine, silent for days, erupted with a deep, powerful, and perfectly smooth purr. The sound was a symphony of flawless engineering, a sound of resurrection. The clock on the wall read 0:22. He had done it in just 22 seconds. Marco's phone clattered to the floor. The other mechanics stood frozen, their mouths hanging open, their faces pale with a mixture of shock and professional shame. They hadn't just been wrong. They had been proven utterly incompetent by a man they considered to be garbage. Mr. Sterling, the millionaire, stared, his mind racing. This wasn't a lucky guess. This was impossible knowledge. He took one look at the humiliated faces of his expert team. "All of you," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "get out. You're fired." He then turned to William, his expression no longer one of arrogance, but of intense, avaricious curiosity. "My office, now." The office was a monument to wealth, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a desk carved from a single piece of oak, and abstract art that was worth more than a house. William stood on the plush Persian rug, looking out of place yet completely unfazed. Sterling gestured to a leather chair and pushed a button on his desk. "My chef will prepare whatever you'd like," he said, his tone now one of a business partner, not a benefactor. "But while you eat, you're going to tell me who you are." As a five-star meal was brought in, Sterling was on the phone, his voice low and commanding, feeding information to a private investigator. He had the garage's security footage, a clear shot of William's face. The results came back before William had finished his soup. Sterling's printer hummed, spitting out a single page. He slid it across the desk. "William Thorne," Sterling read. Aloud, his eyes narrowed. "Youngest lead engineer in the history of Rolls-Royce Motors. Head of the Project Canopus, Bespoke Electrical Systems Division, fired 10 years ago and sued for corporate espionage, accused of attempting to sell trade secrets. Vanished after the trial. Is that you?" William put down his spoon, the first good food he'd had in years suddenly tasteless. He looked at the picture of his younger, hopeful self on the page, then met Sterling's gaze. They lied, he said, his voice raw with a decade of suppressed pain. I didn't steal anything. I was on the verge of creating a new type of hybrid electrical system, one that would have revolutionized the industry. They knew I was going to leave to start my own company, so they framed me. He explained the brutal corporate assassination, the planted evidence, the false witnesses, the ruinous lawsuit designed not just to fire him, but to blacklist him from every corner of the automotive world. They destroyed his reputation, drained his finances, and left him with nothing. They had successfully buried their only true competitor. Sterling listened, his expression turning from curiosity to a cold, calculating anger. He didn't see a homeless man anymore. He saw a weapon, a priceless, discarded asset. When William finished, Sterling stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city he owned. They didn't just fire you, William. They put a genius mind in a cage and threw away the key. He turned back, his eyes gleaming with a predatory energy. I've spent my life competing against men like the ones who run that company, arrogant, bloated, and terrified of true innovation. He leaned over the desk, his voice a low, excited hiss. I have a crazy idea. They tried to bury you. I want to put your name on a billboard. They took your past. I want to build you a future. I have the capital, the connections, the anger. You have the brilliant mind they tried to steal. He paused, letting the weight of his offer hang in the air. Don't just be my mechanic, William. Be my partner. Let's not just fix cars. Let's build a new empire right under their noses. Let's show them what a ghost can really do. A homeless man who was betrayed and left with nothing has just been offered the chance of a lifetime. If you believe everyone deserves a second chance to reclaim their greatness, comment "Rise Again" below. William looked at the powerful millionaire, at the empire of glass and steel behind him, and then at his own calloused hands. For 10 years he had been a ghost, a whisper of a man, running from a past that had been stolen from him. Sterling's offer wasn't just a lifeline. It was a declaration of war against the very people who had erased him. A slow fire, one he thought had been extinguished long ago, began to burn in his chest. All right, Mr. Sterling, William said, his voice steady for the first time in a decade. We have a deal, but on one condition. We don't just build the biggest car repair chain. We build the best. We build a place on principles of honesty and perfect craftsmanship, the very principles those men at Rolls-Royce forgot. Sterling broke into a wide, predatory grin. William, he said, I wouldn't have it any other way. Their rise was meteoric. They didn't start with a chain. They started with a single, unassuming garage. Sterling handled the finances and marketing, while William, now clean-shaven and in a simple but pristine mechanic's uniform, was the soul of the operation. They called it Ghostworks Garage. The name was a quiet, inside joke, a nod to the ghost of Rolls-Royce and the ghost of a man who had come back to life. Word spread like wildfire through the circles of the wealthy. A classic Ferrari that hadn't run in 20 years was purring on the road a week after arriving at their shop. A priceless Mercedes Gullwing with an electrical problem that had baffled experts for months was fixed in an afternoon. William was not just a mechanic. He was a master diagnostician, an automotive surgeon who saw the soul of a machine. His reputation became legendary. Competitors, some secretly funded by the nervous executives in England who had framed him, tried to sabotage their work. But their cheap tricks were no match for William's unassailable genius and Sterling's ruthless business tactics. Their success became a story whispered in the most exclusive country clubs and boardrooms. And eventually those whispers made their way back to the one place William never thought he'd hear from again, the headquarters of Rolls-Royce. One morning, a sleek, modern Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up to Ghostworks Garage. A man in a tailored $1,000 suit stepped out, his face a mask of barely concealed arrogance. It was Marcus Thorne, the very executive who had orchestrated William's downfall 10 years ago. He needed a priceless, one-of-a-kind vintage Rolls-Royce from his personal collection repaired for the upcoming Pebble Beach car show. No one else in the world could figure out the problem. He walked into the reception area, not recognizing the clean, confident man standing behind the counter. I'm told you have a mechanic here who works miracle, Marcus said dismissively. I have a car that needs one. I'll pay whatever it takes. William looked at the man who had stolen his life, his name, and his passion. A slow, cold smile touched his lips. Hello, Marcus, he said. The color drained from the executive's face. He stumbled back, his eyes wide with disbelief and a dawning terror. Thorn? It can't be. You're ruined. You're a ghost? William finished for him. So I've been told. Marcus was trapped. His car, his reputation, was on the line. And the only man who could help him was the man he had destroyed. Swallowing his pride, he begged William to fix the car. William agreed, but not for money. He had Marcus's car brought into the main bay, and with the executive forced to watch, William began to work. As his hands moved with the grace of a master, he calmly and methodically explained every single design flaw, every cost-cutting measure, and every lazy engineering choice the company had made since his departure. He deconstructed not just the car's engine, but the company's entire legacy over the past decade. He showed Marcus exactly how the soul had been stripped from the machines in the name of profit. After an hour, the car was purring perfectly. There, William said, wiping his hands. It's fixed. Marcus, utterly humbled, pulled out his checkbook. How much do I owe you? William simply shook his head. You couldn't afford it, he said softly, and walked away, leaving the executive standing in the shadow of his own shame. That was the moment William's personal war was truly over. He had won. Ghostworks Garage expanded, becoming the undisputed leader in high-end automotive repair and restoration in the nation, just as Sterling had planned. They were rich beyond measure, but for William, the money was secondary. He looked at the young, eager mechanics they hired and saw himself, a kid with a passion for engines, a kid who could be exploited by a ruthless system. He knew he had to do more. He used his millions to open the Ghostworks Academy, a state-of-the-art trade school offering full scholarships to underprivileged and at-risk youth who showed a passion for engineering. He designed the curriculum himself, teaching not just how to fix cars, but the principles of honor, integrity, and true craftsmanship. The final scene of his incredible journey was not in a boardroom, but on the polished floor of his new academy. He was no longer the homeless man, no longer the vengeful ghost, but a mentor, a teacher, a young, nervous teenager, a girl from a foster home with a brilliant aptitude test but no money for school, stood before him for her final interview. She looked at the legendary William Thorne with awe. Why did you choose to build this place, sir? She asked. William smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile that reached his eyes. He looked around at the bustling workshop, at the young minds eager to learn, at the future being built. Because the most beautiful and complex machines aren't made of steel, he said, his voice filled with a quiet, hard-won wisdom. They're made of people, and I've learned that everyone, no matter how broken they seem, deserves a chance to be rebuilt. This story shows that a person's true worth can never be taken from them. If you were inspired by William's journey from betrayal to triumph and believe in the power of second chances, make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss our next powerful story.